Well, we have a bit of a treat here today. We got Allie Boone that's going to talk to us about we're going to cover quite a bit of ground here today. And we're going to expect us to go for about 30, 40 minutes based on our rabbit hole before we even hit record. I'm adding a little extra time just because of.
You already know where this is going.
We don't know where this is going, and you're really easy to chat with. But I'm going to direct everybody. Allie's really got a great opportunity for everybody here. Head over to hipsterinvestments.com/REI mastermind. And she's offered everybody a free book. So might as well take advantage of that. Again, it's hipsterinvestments.com/REI mastermind. Really appreciate it, Allie. And I'm sure everybody's going to appreciate grabbing that book from you.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share the book with everyone. And you called me a treat, so I'm like, I got to give a gift for that. Like, that's exciting. I like being a treat.
Well, I mean, like I said, we blew through like 15 minutes before we even hit record.
The thought even went through my head. I was like, I wonder if we should just hit record because this is pretty good.
Yeah. Except I don't want to talk about that anymore.
I was about to say, except we may have scared everybody out of real estate. We were talking about our horror stories of getting into this industry. It's like, oh, let's start a little more positive. But the good news is we're both still here and survived to talk about it. So there's got to be something there.
There is something there. And in one day, I'm probably going to go into detail exactly what's going on, what went on at that point in time. But with that being said, what I'm going to put you on the spot on right away, and one that I didn't use as a spoiler alert, is that you went from aerospace engineering to real estate investing. Mm-hmm. That has to have been the biggest mindset shift of anybody I've ever met.
Yeah. Yes, but that transition actually is what prompted what I would consider to have been the biggest mindset shift, was really being a 9-to-5 worker, working for somebody, to entrepreneurship. Cause I left this corporate engineering job and suddenly I was on my own. And I'll tell you what, it's now, I guess I'm coming up on 10 years into that. And the mindset shifts that have been required for that, I mean, both as an investor and entrepreneur, which kind of at the end of the day it's a similar mindset. Oh man, for somebody, before I was an engineer, I was a pilot. So like, I'm trained, checklist, bullet points, linear steps 1 through 7. And if you have to deviate, you go to another checklist. And then engineering, I was in control of everything I ever did. And suddenly, real estate investing and entrepreneurship, there was only so much I could control. And that, for me, oh my God, I still am learning that every single day.
Well, I mean, that's really interesting. And I bet you that part of that really paid off with you when it came to real estate investing. I've actually found that a lot of people who get into real estate investing, they don't know how to build out those steps and what they need to do to accomplish their goals.
Yeah. And it's been interesting because I think you had mentioned earlier, like, I do coaching with people. So I kind of had to sit myself down, just even in the last few months, of like, I realized I was giving people what seemed to be two different messages. It's like, on one hand, you need to be in control of your investments. On the other hand, you need to completely let go of control of your investments. And people kind of look at me like, what? Like, I'm blatantly saying two opposing things. And so I've kind of had to think that through of myself. I'm like, what am I talking about? And it's, like, with investing, I would say so many people that I meet, like, if not the majority, especially people getting into real estate, they're trying to dive into something that they have no control over. They don't know enough to be able to have a hand in their own fate. And, people come to me and they're like, do you think this would be a good investment? I'm like, I don't know. Do you? And they don't know, because you got to get the education to know what you're aiming for. So in that regard, like, try not to be a victim to the process or a victim to the industry. Like, you control your destiny. On the other hand, at the end of the day, we can only do the best that we can do. We can put risk mitigations in, we can stay on top of things, we can get the education, but sometimes we just kind of have to let go of the end result also, because you can do everything correctly. This speaks to analysis paralysis or paralysis by analysis or whatever. People are trying to learn so much. They're trying to learn how to make it 100% perfect. And you can't guarantee that. You can only do the best that you can, which does involve that education piece and controlling your destiny. But people get so hung up on whether it's going to work or not. You kind of have to let that part go. So it's this interesting concept of control. Yes, on one hand, you've got to take control over things. On the other hand, you have to completely let go of control of things. And honestly, I see why people were getting confused.
Yeah. No, it's understandable. That's a great topic. What you just brought up, though, is the concept of the leaving the corporate world. I mean, that does take a significant risk and a significant mindset shift.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, aerospace engineer, I would imagine you were doing fairly well.
I was doing very well, and I was very in control. And I could control what happened. That was the thing, is that when I left that, my control kind of disappeared to a certain degree. But yeah, engineering, I had the nice paycheck every Friday. I had a great health insurance policy. I'll never have that again. I just had to show up where I was supposed to be and what time I was supposed to be there and do my job. And, sometimes there's a part of me that misses that a little bit, because it's funny saying that aerospace engineering could be brainless, but anytime you're working a job, it can be a little bit more brainless. Whereas now on the other side of that, it's like all 24 hours of my day are thinking about my investing or my entrepreneur. I have to do all of those things, where when I checked out of my engineering job, it's like, cool, go home, watch TV, chill out, no big deal. So yeah, it was definitely a change.
Right. So, I typically find that there's either some sort of pain that causes somebody to make this, to push you to make some kind of change, or you have established a big enough why to pull you into that direction. What happened with you? What caused that situation to finally occur?
I 100% agree that it's one of those two things that causes it. And for me, it was the latter. It was a why. And I think in hindsight, and I probably knew it at the time, ever since I was a kid, I kind of knew I would probably never be able to work for somebody. Like, I've always been very independent, but my why, 100%, 1,000% is freedom. And, my idea was, but like I said, I used to fly airplanes. So through grad school, when I was getting my master's degree in engineering, I was flight instructing as my side job. And my thought was, I loved flight instructing so much, but believe me when I say it's never been known for good pay. It's like, how can I do this thing that I love and not be reliant on the money? And then my other thing that was constantly in my head is, I wanted to be able to say yes to friends who wanted to go get lunch on a Tuesday. Like, I just wanted the option to do whatever I wanted. I've always been a little rebellious in that department. Like, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. It'd be a shocker, if I told you I'm single, I'm sure. But I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And so that drive for me was so strong that I had to get out. And so it was funny because, here I am, I go all the way through grad school, get a master's degree. So I'd been in school for, I don't even know how long. And I get my first corporate engineering job, and it was a dream company, dream scenario. I mean, I had just landed gold, and I'll never forget. I tell this story all the time. I walk like a mile underground, because, this is all like top secret stuff and all this cool stuff. And so now I'm working underground. I was like, okay. And I turn the corner into my cubicle, my new office, my first big girl office. I turned the corner and I looked at this drab gray cubicle. I actually tell the story in the book too. This drab gray cubicle. And in my head, before I ever sat down on the chair, I was like, this isn't going to work. I knew it right then. I had not even sat down in the stupid chair. And, think about it. I was out flight instructing. My office was the sky. I got to fly airplanes and adventure and see cool things. And here I am now underground in this gray cubicle in an office chair. And I was like, never going to work. So, 7, 8, 9 years of school, I was like, oh, that's cool. So basically from the minute I sat down, my brain was already stewing of how am I going to get out of this? Like I have to get out of this. And it took 5 years for me to figure out a way out of it. But trust me, I was motivated. And to this day, it's the why. And I even have a whole chapter in the book of finding your why. And it's not like, oh, well, I want financial freedom. That's not your why. Why do you want financial freedom? And like when you get deeper and deeper and deeper with that why, when you realize how big your why is, you get real motivated real fast. So that was 100% my journey was based on the big why.
Yeah, that's awesome. And again, since you brought up the book, I'm going to just remind everybody you can get a free copy of it by going to
Yeah.
hipsterinvestments.com/REI mastermind.
Yep.
Take advantage of that. And I really like your website, actually. If you go there,
Ah,
go to
thanks.
hipsterinvestments.com. There's a ton of resources here.
Thanks. I'm actually trying to build the allieboone.com site because we've talked about kind of coaching. I do business consulting, so I want to make it. Hipster's site is mostly specific to turnkeys and a little bit of generic real estate stuff, but I appreciate that feedback because it motivates me to get the even bigger site going with more resources.
So, I mentioned that I read through the one sheet and I do a little research on you.
Oh,
And one thing that keeps coming up is spiritual psychology. And this
I'm
is the,
impressed that one came up.
and well, it's the first time I've seen that associated with somebody. And so
I mean, I don't know if you know this about me, but I like a good story.
so I figured it would generate another story. So let's go there.
So it's funny. So I got my first master's degree in aerospace engineering, and I ended up getting a second master's degree in spiritual psychology. And a lot of times when people, I'm saying something about a degree or whatever, I usually just call it psychology because the minute you put that spiritual word in, people are like, wait, what? And it's not a religious thing. It's not whatever, but it's funny because I honestly only started that program, the spiritual psychology one, because I thought it would be hilarious to tell people that I had master's degrees in aerospace engineering and spiritual psychology. Like, I moved to Los Angeles. What else are you going to do? Then become a professional hippie. I was like, I can have a degree in being a hippie. Like, you kind of have to do it at that point. And then once I got into the program, I absolutely fell in love with it. It changed my entire life. To this day, my life would be completely different had I not done that. So I ended up going through the whole 2 years and got the degree. So it is still the funny story of having both, because I mean, talk about different ends of the brain spectrum.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was absolutely game changing. And the things I learned in that program, I use every single day in investing, entrepreneurship, life, it changed my perspective about a ton of stuff.
Well, what are a couple of those low hanging fruits that you could share then that changed your perspective or that could help somebody else right now?
Um, One of the big things that I learned kind of, it may have been in the first weekend, and it has changed a lot for me is now caveat this. We all have different belief systems. This is just one belief system. It's not to say anyone else is wrong. So if I say anything that, counters your personal belief system, no problem. It's just what I took for myself, which was one of the big ones was that everybody has their own inner resources because I was the person growing up and even today that I've for the most part been very capable, very strong, very independent. Like I can kind of be the rock for people that are struggling through whatever. And my old mindset about that was I felt this huge not obligation, but like responsibility to help people through their challenges and to really like, I don't want to say do it for them, but kind of to some degree. And being taught that we all have our own inner resources, like a lot of what we learned in that program was facilitation. And so instead of, if I'm giving you advice and I'm telling you how to do things, that's me assuming you can't figure that out on your own. And I also don't know the best way for you to resolve your challenge. So me realizing that you have your own inner resources and my job is really to just be there and help facilitate you to connect with those own inner resources. Of course, if I have a good idea for you, I can share it. I can say, have you thought about this? But then if you come back to me and tell me like, I decided to do it this way. And I'm thinking in my head, well, that's never going to work. it's not that it's your journey, and I don't know that it's not going to work. And so for me, it just took a whole bunch of pressure off of realizing it's not my job to save the rest of the world and everybody around me, and to just be there from a place of compassion, of support, support people how I can, but taking that pressure off, because I don't know where I adopted that feeling of pressure of, helping everyone through their stuff. Yeah, that was a big one for me, and just kind of really releasing that responsibility. That was a big one.
Yeah. You made me think of something, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to express this or put it into proper wording. When you say everybody has their internal strengths or
own inner resources.
Yeah, their inner resources. For some reason, it spurred the concept that everybody has their demons as well. But in some ways, I think a lot of people are misinterpreting some of those things as demons when it could be used for good.
Yeah.
A good thing, for example, if you're constantly obsessive about something, you study and study and you're in analysis paralysis, you could redirect that energy and that experience and that actually consider it an ability and direct it and make use of that.
Yeah. Yeah, you absolutely. It's called reframing. It's like, okay, hang on, let's take this thought or this idea or this whatever and reframe it. How can we use that to the best of our abilities? And while you were saying that, it kind of brought up something that I learned early on with investing, even before I quit my corporate job, was asking myself, what is truly the worst case scenario? So analysis paralysis typically is based in fear, for good reason. If you're about to slap $50,000 down on something and you don't totally know what you're doing, fair enough to say you might be a little fearful, and you should be a little bit fearful because you need to be prompted to learn, actually know what you're doing. But what's the absolute worst case scenario that could happen? Because for me, when I actually sit down and ask that, it's not as bad necessarily as I thought it was. So let's say that worst case scenario in that situation is you lose 50 grand. Yeah, that could absolutely suck, but you didn't die either. And I think so many of us adopt this kind of, it's a natural in our human brains, like fight or flight. We assume that obviously we're going to die if things go wrong. That's it's a survival mechanism. And when we realize that we aren't, it can take some of that pressure off. So the analysis paralysis that we're talking about, it's like, okay, hang on. What is the worst case scenario here? So I slap $50,000 down and it all goes kaput, or, what is the worst case? And so using that as a tool to help you overcome those fears, because just tying exactly into what you're saying is sometimes it's about reframing. Sometimes it's about, acknowledging that maybe we have a misperception about something, like, oh, you're right. That doesn't mean that, changing, altering the misperceptions, or just really kind of facing those fears. Like, how bad are we talking here? Like, is my life actually in danger? If I lose 50 grand, what happens? Is my family going to be homeless for 10 years? Well, that's okay. Maybe we don't invest 50 grand, and really, going back to that control thing, it's like learning to control your mind, but also letting go at the same time.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. And now I'm starting to see where you got the title for your book, because part of it is life lessons on hacking your mind before you hack your wallet.
Yeah, I love that too, because in my very first year of entrepreneurship, kind of in the light of what we're talking about, I had to conduct multiple kind of I had to trick my mind. So remember, I was this control freak, pilot, engineer, like I had never lost control. And so now I no longer had control. I couldn't make people buy properties. I couldn't make my business effort, my entrepreneurship efforts work. I couldn't make any of that happen. I could do the best that I could every day, but I couldn't make the money come in. And I didn't really for the first year. And my mind was like, alert, alert, mayday, eject, get out, like, hello, I live in Los Angeles. My rent payments are not cheap, and neither are my grocery bills. And so the first kind of trick that I did with my mind was like, I was like, okay, cool. I appreciate, I'm like, I look like a schizophrenic talking on my couch. And I'm like, I appreciate you trying to protect me. There are legitimate concerns here, gotta have money to eat. But what if we do a trial, an experiment? I think this was maybe like, I don't know, April or May of that year. And I said, here's what we'll do. From now until December 31st at midnight, we don't have to worry about anything. Doesn't matter if we make a penny. And on January 1st, we will sit back and see how things are going. And if they look like they're going absolutely terrible and this isn't going to work, go back to engineering. No problem. Not a big deal. If things look like they're working, cool, we'll keep on. And right then my mind was like, okay, cool. It needed some kind of assurance of like, we're not going to die. And so once I gave it that assurance, I was so relaxed after that because I didn't have to worry about anything for the next 8-9 months, however long that was. And then on January 1st, I was like, okay, what's the verdict? And things had started picking up. I wasn't suddenly making a fortune, but things had picked up. Things were gaining traction. So me and my mind, we extended our experiment trial thing for, I think it was like 3 months after that. It's like, okay, let's just renew it. 3 months from now, same deal. And that kept me going. So all of that to say, hacking your mind, that's been my experience, is learning how to work with what's in here to make it all work. Because to me, it's not about like entrepreneurship, investing. It's not about the logistics of the thing that you're doing. It's about your mindset. Like, how are you going to navigate all of this when things get complicated or whatever? And that's the hacking your mind part and I put life lessons because a lot of the stuff in the book, if not most of it, can be applicable to any aspect of life, not just real estate investing. But yeah, see, now you got me talking psychology and I won't shut up if you don't stop me. So my whole thing, I absolutely love the psychology end of it. Hence, also the other master's degree. And I think it's critical. I think it's absolutely critical. And it's not talked about enough because you Google how to be a real estate investor. What are you going to get? A how-to guide on how to flip a house or how to wholesale. Well, helpful for some, but not most of us. So that's a lot of the motivation where the book came from.
Well, I think it was interesting that you talked as if you were negotiating with another person.
Oh, and I sounded, if my neighbors probably heard me. They're like, I hope someone else is in there because who's she talking to? I sound like a schizophrenic on my couch all the time. Fortunately, I live in Venice Beach and everyone's on meth and they're talking to their own voices too. So I think everyone just assumes I fit in.
That's awesome. I think it's interesting. Like everybody, I always find it interesting what triggers people, like something that makes it like, okay, I got it. I know what to do.
Yeah.
You took that approach and you basically negotiated yourself. And to me, I actually in a way, I guess I negotiated with myself as well. And the fact that, okay, if I'm going to do this, what do I need to do? And I actually made a list of like daily activities of, okay, this is what I need to do on a daily basis to achieve X goal. And it took me that type of exercise for me to go, okay, this makes sense. Now I know what to do tomorrow.
Yeah.
I know that's.
Yeah. Well, and I love that because so much of this journey too is us. Was I writing about this earlier? This was fresh in my head earlier. I know. I was scrolling through Instagram and I follow, a lot of thought leaders and money and investing, all that kind of stuff. And while so much of the advice and the information they give is fantastic, there's a whole set of stuff that I'm like, I don't agree with it. It doesn't mean it's wrong for other people, but for me personally, it doesn't work. And you mentioned like a to-do list every day. I tried, and I wish I was this person. I had a business mentor one time that showed me his like daily schedule broken out, and it was down to like the half-hour intervals. And I was like, oh my God, I can't even imagine how much I would accomplish if I would structure myself, because I am not a structured person. I wake up when I want to. I'll probably watch an episode of my soap opera before I work. And I'm like, I can't imagine what all I'd be accomplishing. So I tried to give myself that structure. Every part of my being was like, get out. It absolutely, I accomplished less with the structure. And, so it's about knowing ourselves, like what's going to work for you in a day. And this is part of the mind hacking. because other people can't tell you necessarily what's going to work exactly for you. So like you figured out if you have a list of things you want to accomplish in a day, like that helps you do that. Like, and it, someone else, it may be a different tool. And so it's that willingness to know and accept what will work for you. I wish I was the scheduled structure person. I'd give anything. I'd also give anything to be a morning person. I'm not either of those. And so it's kind of like, well, here's what we're working with type of thing. And, being willing to do what it takes and realize that that's specific to you and do it.
Yeah, and I probably should clarify. I never generated an actual to-do list every day. It was like I knew X number of activities are required to find one deal.
Yeah.
And so it was the same list day after day. I had to make
Yep.
sure I hit X number of points to make sure that I'm going to generate so many leads in a month
Yeah.
so that I could maintain a lifestyle.
That's awesome. I love that. And it goes back to that, like, the thing I learned in that first year of as an investor and entrepreneur was all I can do is the very best that I can do every single day. Cause, I was relying on people buying properties and things that I couldn't control. And so like with you, the best that you can do is the steps that will get you that. You don't know if the leads are actually going to come in, but all you can do is do what you need to do and then work with it as it comes after that. And I love that. The more people figure that out of like, what do I need to do? Because it's putting that best foot forward. It's, not to say like, not to bring in like karma and manifestation or whatever, but like you're proving your intention. You will make it happen if you do those things, like set yourself up for it. It'll happen.
Yeah, no. And I'm one of those guys that I've learned that I will get hyper focused on something, and
Meow.
for yeah, here she is.
Cat.
You wanted to see
Yeah,
her.
I do want to see the kitty.
Here she is.
Oh, she has little boots. Oh, and she's little.
Yeah, she's about a year old now.
Oh, I love her.
So anyway, she what I was saying is that I can get hyper focused on something, and then if I could be designing a logo or dinking around with who knows what and not doing those lead generation activities.
Yeah.
So it prevented me from getting sidetracked with some of those other activities. So I refuse to do anything that isn't money generating during business hours. If it's going to be something like that, it has to be done, after 8:30 p.m.
I love that. I mean, that's an exact example of learning to hack your mind. It's like, okay, haha, I'm gonna win over this. Like figure out it's. And somebody asked me one time why I use the word hacking, like what, and I was like, I kind of have to think about it, but like if you hack through brush, that's what we're doing. Our minds are full of all sorts of voices and distractions and shiny objects. And my favorite is thinking of it like the inner roommate, the naysayer, the negative voices, whatever. I call it my inner roommate. I'm like, shut up. But that's like what you came up with. That's hacking your mind. It's like, okay, no shiny objects during the day, money making things only. Done. That could be a chapter in the book. Like that's the stuff that people need to adopt for themselves 100%.
How hard is it to write a book? I mean, I can't imagine anything more daunting than that blank page.
It was well, so I actually am fine with the writing because I was a writer for Bigger Pockets for years, and like I actually had an English teacher in college that changed my writing I've never been the same writer in a good way. I kept turning in papers, and I think this was like my first or second year in college, I don't know, and I kept turning in papers, and she called me in after class one day, and I was like, uh-oh, and she could tell that I was trying to sound a certain way. I was trying to sound, however a writer is supposed to sound. And her exact words were to me, just transcribe what's in your head. Just straight out of your head, because I was trying to sound like a writer. She said, don't try to sound like a writer. Just write what you're thinking, kind of conversational, whatever. I've always done that ever since. And it's funny because people who know me in person, they're like, you write exactly how you talk. And I'm like, because I'm literally moving it from the brain to the hand. So the writing part for me, not a problem. I could write for just hours on end, no problem. However, the logistical dynamic of putting a book out, like it was so frustrating because again, just like new investors or whatever, I didn't know what I didn't know. I probably still don't know most of it. And it was one of those situations I was willing to hire someone to help. And I've learned very quickly, if you say, hey, can you help me put my book out? Everybody will say yes. Not helpful. I'm like, oh, because then they have no idea what they're doing. And so it was funny because I had told myself, I was like, wow, I have an actual degree in rocket science, and I cannot for the life of me figure out how to put this book out. Like this should not be difficult, but it's a lot like real estate investing where we don't take a class on this in school, like how to publish a book. That would be very handy. But because no one ever taught us this and we didn't have a syllabus to follow, you kind of have to figure it out on your own, it's not that it's a hard process itself, but trying to figure out what the process is in the first place is terrible. So I had started the book so many times and stopped it for the sole reason of, I can't even imagine having to actually publish it because that sounds hard. And then in 2020, when the COVID quarantine, the gates slammed down, I was like, oh, well, what am I going to do now? I was like, well, I guess this seems like a good time to figure out how to put a book out. So yeah, the writing part for me is easy, but the actual logistics and cleaning it up, editing, it's terrible. But I knew I could hire someone to do it all for me, but I was like, it's quarantine. I have nothing better to be doing right now. Anyways, like, let me force myself to learn this process because I think we all need to learn new things occasionally. Now, do I want to become a professional book publisher? I don't even want to do it for my second book, but yeah, it was humbling, honestly, because there's so much stuff that I do all the time and I'm good at a lot of things, and then it just doesn't seem like it should be that hard to put out a little piece of paper. But
well, it's always, I think I hope you've been using that real estate investing isn't rocket science. I mean, if anybody can use that phrase, it would be you.
Even worse, how have I never thought of them? Hello. I'm like, wait a minute. I've been in this. I quit engineering, let's see, almost 10 years ago, and I've never once thought about that. Like, that could have been the name of the book.
I think I just found the title of this episode.
I think you did, and I think you may have found the title for like my career from here on. Like, done.
So, well, Allie, this has been a great conversation. I'm just going to remind everybody, we've been talking about your book, and I'm going to transition one more time. Head over to hipsterinvestments.com/REI mastermind. Get a free copy of Allie's latest book, Not Your How-To Guide, Real Estate Investing, Life Lessons on Hacking Your Mind Before You Hack Your Wallet. Very worthwhile. In fact, the website's got a ton of resources. Make sure you take a look at that. But before I let you go, Allie, is there a question you wished I would have asked you here today?
Oh, you opened the psychology door. I'm like, oh man, you could have me talking for hours. Yeah, no, I love I love conversations like these because it's not just about the real estate investing. It's about, to me, what is more important. And I think you asked amazing questions. That's what people want to know is like, how are you going to get out of corporate? How are you going to survive those years? How are you going to get past the fears? And psychology, man, we can all be schizophrenics on our couches talking to our inner roommate, and it'll be fine.
Well, I can't thank you enough. This was a great conversation, and you're always welcome back. And I hope you take me up on that invite.
Oh, you be careful, because I'll show up like every day. I'll be like, I'm back.
I'd love that.
You asked a lot of questions that a lot of people don't ask in this industry, and yeah, you could get me going for a long time. So I'd love to come back.
Just like you said, I frankly don't think we spend enough time on it. Everybody's it's a lot of how to, but frankly, as far as I'm concerned, until you get it right between the ears, it's not going to manifest in the real world. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
And it's funny that more people aren't talking about the mindset, because if what's the one book that got all of us our start? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And guess what that is? It's a mindset book. He doesn't tell you exactly how to do the, step 1, step 2, step 3. It's a mindset book. And it's like, between the time that book came out and changed millions of people's lives, it's how I got started. It's how most people get started. But yet no one's kind of really noticing, like, you guys do realize that was a mindset book, right? Like, it's the mindset is where the power is. It's not in the how-to guides. It's how are you going to navigate all of this? And I think that's why Rich Dad, Poor Dad became what it was, is that it for the first time changed so many people's mindsets. So why are we not talking more about mindset? I think there's proof in the pudding that it's critical. For me, it's been critical. It's every coaching client I coach. It's critical. It's all mindset. It's never the logistics that are the hard part. It's our minds that are messing with us.
No, I can't ask for a better way to end this. I really appreciate it. This was great, and hope we can chat again sometime.
Absolutely. I would love it.